Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our Sales and Marketing Alignment panel. I'm super blessed again to say that I'm pretty darn good friends with most of the folks here in this event today. So it's always pretty nice. We've known each other for many years. If you do, just a couple sort of reminders. If you have any questions that you want to submit to the panelists, go ahead and click on the Ask a Question button here at the bottom, or you can just comment on the wall, whatever is easier. The one upside of clicking on the Ask a Question button is that you'll be able to, if you want to come back later on, watch the answer to your question, because this platform has the ability to record that answer. So why don't we go ahead and go around the horn and introduce ourselves, starting off with Brooke.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brooke Burdge. I lead marketing at Attentive. We are a personalized text messaging solution. We work with over 2,000 brands. So I'm part of the founding team. We started the company in 2016. So now we're edging up close to 500 people. So obviously our sales and marketing teams have grown a ton over the past 4 years. So definitely have learned a lot about how to scale together in that way.
Awesome. And Brooke has just been part of some fantastic high growth startups that have been super successful. Brooke, I'm biased, but I'm so happy to see the success that and growth that Attentive has had, irrespective of the fact that a lot of folks there are friends of mine too that work there. But
yeah.
You've done an incredible job. So just
Thank
kudos.
you. Yeah, our last company was Tap Commerce. We were acquired by Twitter. So what's interesting about our story is the head of sales, head of marketing kind of rejoined and started up Attentive together. So have that kind of past experience together.
Yeah, it's no surprise that you're so successful, particularly taking the DNA from the last company with all the learnings, and now this is a multi-billion-dollar company. So drinks on you next time. Nikki Nixon, Nikki, why don't you just take a quick second to introduce yourself? Nikki's done some incredible things in her career, a lot of startups, but I won't steal her thunder. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit?
Yeah, my name is Nikki Nixon, and I am an ABM manager at AutoDesk. And AutoDesk is an amazing company, probably one of the leaders in the forefront on the ABM movement. So prior to AutoDesk, I was a part of several different smaller companies, one of which was Terminus, where I helped found the Flip My Funnel movement and really found the ABM space. So it's been a neat journey to be able to watch the ABM space evolve, and then also now be a part of one of the best ABM teams in the world. So
I'm gonna have to give you a shout out too, because you're one of the originators, the godmothers of ABM, from what I and I really sat down and geeked out. I just had no life for a long time. So kudos to you.
Yeah.
Ryan, how are you, man? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, the ultimate growth in sales and marketing hustler that I've met, at probably one of the top 3 in my entire life.
Oh, I really appreciate that. That's nice. I feel like I'm not worthy with these other panelists either. I can't even make eye contact with you guys. So I'm Ryan O'Hara, a VP of Marketing and Growth at LeadIQ. And we help companies, especially sales teams, with increasing your sales and marketing efficiencies by focusing on making it so you can do higher value activities and stuff. And my job mainly, I put a lot of content out there about sales, prospecting, marketing, all those things. But it's kind of exciting because I've been alone and isolated, and now you guys are actually going to listen to me. There's real people. Hi. So it's really exciting. Thank you for having me on here. I'm excited.
Well, we're going to cover a couple topics, and there are folks on this, on the session that are CEOs of companies, marketers, but also at larger companies, but also folks who are in sales and smaller companies, right? And so, maybe we'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff that maybe, would be slam dunks for us, but are useful to them. And I think that as we've been talking today, we've seen that there's different versions to some of the fundamental things that we've always focused on within our role due to this new world, right? And so my first question, Brooke, is, we talk about MQLs versus SQLs and these sort of things. And now where we see that marketing is being now held responsible for revenue in ways that maybe we didn't in the past, right? Where our metrics or KPIs were like leads and just numbers of MQLs or traffic and form submissions. But now that we have this responsibility to really care more about revenue, how are we defining today what an MQL is? Whether we're just passing straight to a closer and we don't have an SDR team, or we're passing that over to to an SDR to work. What are some of the changes, and how would you define it now? And let's just say in 2021, which is around the corner, right?
Yeah, great question. So I think something you said there that sticks with me is around, ultimately, we want this to be pipeline. We want this to be revenue. So it's not about just a vanity metric of how many leads marketing is bringing in. It's like, I care more about what becomes closed won eventually. So that kind of determines more of what the profile we're looking for with that MQL is. Just thinking about the life cycle, I'd say I like to think of marketing as kind of like the opening act for sales. We're warming them up. They're still in the interest and consideration phase, but they're maybe not quite ready to have that sales conversation and make a decision and take some kind of action. So ultimately, we're really trying to give them all the information that they need to be able to step up, raise their hand, say, hey, I'm ready to talk to someone in sales now. I think that there's a lot of ways that we gather that intelligence. We've talked about lead scoring and being able to identify that, but also just like figuring out when, like you said, is it the right time to go directly to an AE? Is it the right time to give it to the inside sales team? We recently implemented a tool called Chili Piper that's been really helpful to kind of auto route a lot of that. So that's been valuable for us. But, just going back to it, really, we need to define marketing qualified leads and our goals around pipeline, revenue contribution, and kind of work backwards from that, like looking at our ideal customer profile, then kind of take it back to what do we need to look out for as signs and signals that this could be a prospect that could convert.
Yeah, and you talked about ideal customer profile, and it's so funny because, for some reason I've seen that ICPs, like marketing has their own definition, and then sales would have their own definition, and it's so important nowadays to really be able to align. Nikki, what would you say? What's your feedback around this topic? Like, how are you really defining, especially in an ABM world, right? That's your specialty. Like, you have to be totally aligned around this, right?
Yeah, you absolutely do. For marketing and sales to have different ICPs is just a recipe for disaster. So you absolutely do have to. And I think it needs to be done with input from sales as well. So marketing should be meeting with sales on a regular basis. I think communication is absolutely key to figuring out what that ICP is. And I think where marketing can really help is with bringing data to the table of, hey, here's what we think is our best ICP based on the data that we have available. And then also, I think there's an opportunity to fine tune that as you go along as well. And so for us at Autodesk, we choose our accounts based on a yearly basis. But in some of the other smaller companies I've worked at, we chose our accounts on a quarterly basis. And so there was a quarterly discussion of, okay, is this still our ICP? Is this still what we should be chasing based on what our business trends are currently or what we're seeing in the market? So it really depends on how volatile your business is in terms of how frequently you should have that meeting. But I think it absolutely should be happening, and it should be done in coordination with sales.
Brooke mentioned earlier, the workflow might change based on scoring, and something might go in straight to an AE and skip the SDR. What are some of those attributes? I know when I was in the role, if it was on someone's target list and it was like Coca-Cola, it's like, the SDR, skip the SDR, let's send it straight to that rep. What are some of those attributes that the folks out there could look at?
So I think Peter Herbert actually, I think you know Peter. I'll give a shout out to Peter. I think he figured this out the best with really the fit intent engagement model. And so if they have the intent, we already know they're qualified based on our ICP. And if they have the intent to buy, I think that routes them directly towards an AE, especially if that's an account that an AE has already been working and they raise their hand, then you definitely want to route that towards the AE. And sometimes as well, you might want to consider title. If it's a higher level title, they might not want to talk to an SDR. They might want to go straight to that account executive and start having that conversation. And likewise, the AE may prefer for that to be the case. If it's a lower level title, maybe the SDR can qualify them and then send them over to an AE.
Ryan, you're in data and you're probably having this conversation every day, right? You're like that middle person between marketing and sales saying, hey, data needs to flow. What's your take on this? Like, how are you seeing organizations do this across the board?
Yeah, so a lot of things have changed, especially with 2020. One of the things that I'd kind of look at is if you think about inbound versus outbound a little bit, they're kind of meshing into one thing. If you're an inbound marketer, you bring leads in, leads raise their hand. It's about finding context. And if you're doing outbound prospecting, it's about, marketing's about creating context. Outbound's about finding context. And that's kind of what you need to do to reach out and break in with these accounts and stuff. What's happening now is when you get an MQL in, there's so many people doing marketing and online conferences and ebooks and all this stuff that it's hard to get noticed with this noise and be seen. What you really need to do today is use the person that raises their hand and turn that into a whole account plan of how I break into that account. So for you, for example, with your Coca-Cola example, if someone comes in from Coca-Cola, yeah, you want to give that to an AE, but that AE needs to go and roll up their sleeves and find other contacts and institutionally go through the entire organization to sell to other departments, because they're not having those side conversations anymore. They're not sitting next to each other in offices and being like, yo, I just did this meeting with this guy with a crappy Muppet haircut. Like, that's just not happening anymore. And because that side conversation's gone, you have to proactively take that and make a whole account plan based on an inbound coming in. So you might get an MQL that raises their hand and says, hey, that's a good lead, but it might turn into an SQL when you qualify and go through the normal qualification processes that you might be using, whether that's banned. There's some other ones that people use as well. But you now need to also go attack the account and other departments that you might institutionally impact. And it might be in ways that you might not realize.
Awesome. You know what? It's interesting because I think there was a number of stakeholders within the average enterprise sale that have to be talked to. And we know this. I remember when I was a door-to-door salesperson, and this was a long time ago in college, I would knock on the door, and then, dad would or mom would show up. And I'd say, hey, I'm selling these like CD-ROMs, and I used to sell those big encyclopedia things. You probably remember because your dad like nearly punched me in the face or something, or threw something at me. But anyways, that was almost that happened very rarely actually, but it did happen. Guns, all kinds of weird stuff. But anyways, and so I would do my approach. I'd go inside. I'd sit down on the floor. I'd show the individual my product, and I'd say, I'd go for my close. Oh, does this look like it would be valuable? And they say yes. I'd say, great. Well, it's only $1,000 for this, set of books. And I'd pull out my pad, and then they would say, oh, but can you come back later on? Because I got to ask my wife or my husband and my mom, my grandma. And 99.8% of the time, every time I would go back, I would be told to hit the road as soon as I got to the door. So point is that, we weren't talking to all the right stakeholders, and we've always known this, right? We've always known as, we needed to create these account plans and really touch all the stakeholders involved to get a deal done, particularly the enterprise. And to Ryan's point, now we're just like in our bedrooms and communication is harder than ever. Brooke, we talk about ABM, and of course, this ABM is super important these days. I mean, you really have to be able to sort of to do this properly. How do you make sure that sales and marketing align on those top target accounts across all the variables that we need them to align with? Because messaging wrong, data syncing between systems are wrong, and we can have problems. I mean, we've all been there where marketing and sales send similar emails at the same time, and those sort of things.
Yeah. So around the ABM concept, I think one big thing is, where do you begin coming up with your list? So we do that every year. So we're going to be, coming up with our updated ABM list. I think it's nice to have it on an annual basis because it really gives both teams more of a guidepost to work towards the whole year. So that's how we approach it. I think it's also coming up with what is the strategy for those accounts from marketing side, for sales side, and how can we stay in lockstep together. Opportunities for campaign engagement or things like event invitations. We really want to make sure that, if we are going to send a marketing branded email, if they're opted into our lead nurturing, for example, like how can we coordinate that with the AE who's already having conversations with them? So we want to make sure that it comes across as very high touch and very thoughtful. I think that the challenge there can be when you have a little bit too many accounts in your ABM list. So we've actually kind of narrowed down. We have our ABM list, which we use on marketing side in a couple of ways. We'll use that for LinkedIn ads, for example, for targeting those accounts. We also use it when we're evaluating different event sponsorships as kind of a guidepost, like is our target audience here? So we kind of set it up in that capacity so that it's a guidepost for marketing. But yeah, we really need to make sure that it's coordinated, especially when there's already been the demo. That's when things really need to look like they're coming from one brand, one company, and in sync between marketing and sales.
That's awesome. And this is in the same vein, Nikki. How do you find that balance? What's the difference between the marketing email and that sales email? Because myself as an AE, let's say that demo has happened, and whether that was done by an SDR or the AE, or both, and they sort of were able to balance that out. How do we align around that so we don't bug or spam the prospect and destroy the relationship?
Yeah, so I've seen this work a couple of different ways. I think in smaller companies where ABM is more of a customer acquisition model, I think it's that delineation between when there's an opportunity and when there's not an opportunity. In larger companies where it's more of an expansion model, like everyone on my current list is a customer. So there it's more of we use both. We use the sales emails. We also use the nurture emails or the marketing emails. And so the marketing emails serve the purpose of nurturing, but the sales emails are really, they come from the salespeople. They're not like super HTML, they're regular text. They look like the salesperson is actually sending it, and they're more sales driven, they're more product driven. So I think that's kind of the delineation too. Sometimes those marketing emails are more higher level industry type content, and then the sales emails are more product driven. So it really depends on what your goal with ABM is, whether it's acquisition or whether it's land and expand.
Can I jump in on this a little bit too?
Yeah, absolutely. I was about to go to you.
So
I love your setup, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I'm in the corner of my bedroom.
This is like a fake bedroom, by the way. It's really weird. So way that I look at it a little bit is when you're making a sales email, your sales email is going after the individual. When you're making a marketing email, it's going after the persona. And that's kind of the two different, or the account in that case, sometimes depending on both those things coming into effect. With a sales email, the advantage you have is you're John Henry going up against the machine. You can basically go and figure out a way to personalize something, look up information on the person, write something about them instead of yourself, write something about them instead of your product, write something about their problems and how you could fix those problems and drive it toward a meeting with those things. On the marketing front, I kind of look at marketing emails as a way for you to build a brand affinity, get someone to like your brand, get some thought leadership, think you're pretty cool, and kind of build a little bit of personality on that end so that they get attached to you as a brand. Your brand needs personality. It needs to fit into a mold that says, hey, I'm more than a plain automaton organization. I have a personality and a feel and a life of my own. What I recommend today, and especially coming in with my joke at the beginning about like being out of touch and not getting to talk to people, is you actually want to make a human connection with people in your marketing emails as well. So if I'm writing copy for a marketing email, maybe what I'm pushing is actually the person, not necessarily the company. And on the sales email, I'm pushing the individual that I'm targeting, and that's what the subject and the main part of the email is. Now, one last thing I want to add that I think people are mixing up that need to think about this is in March, when all these offices started getting shut down and we started going to our home life, we started being on screen at our homes. Our personal and professional lives are starting to mesh together a little bit more. What that means is that people aren't craving to get in love, fall in love with a brand. They're craving to get in love with a person that works at that company. For example, when I watch Conan O'Brien, I don't go and say, man, I'm going to go like TBS on Facebook. I'm going to go like Conan O'Brien's page. That same human nature is going to happen with your marketing emails that you do and put out there. And that's really important too. The biggest fallacy that we make with sales emails is we assume the people we're prospecting like their jobs. The average person changes jobs every 18 months. So that means that they're probably not liking their job, a lot of the people that you're reaching out to, if they're in that last 6-month window and they're staring down at their screen waiting for 5 p.m. to hit every day. Focus your effort and your time on doing stuff that's about them, not their company. If you're doing a sales email, focus your time and effort on building a likable personality that actually informs them and entertains them if you're doing a marketing email. That's kind of the split.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Brooke, you know, we again, with this ABM and just in general, how do you know, let's say an SQL happens from an MQL, so you sent it over, but it's still not ready to close, right? And you have your systems synced, your sales systems and your marketing systems. You know, when do you know that marketing should start to nurture that? And do you sit down and have those kind of rules with sales? And what does that conversation kind of look like?
Yeah, good question. Well, if it's an ABM account, we actually do something where sales can request support for kind of a re-engagement campaign or initiative where we'll help come up with a creative way to get that brand's attention again. We also execute quarterly our own marketing-led re-engagement campaigns where we'll look at things that are in the funnel that a demo already occurred, but they haven't closed one yet. And what can we do to get them excited about Attentive again? We did this as a big lift in Q3 because our big time, where retail e-commerce is now the Black Friday, Cyber Monday time. So we really wanted to close as many deals as possible leading up to before November. So some of that is more of these one-off campaign moments where we aim to do something like that quarterly for whatever's in the funnel. And then there's also more automation going on behind the scenes to know if a lead has kind of had no activity on it or no response on it after a certain period of time, and kind of move that to a different targeting segment and move that into kind of flag like, hey, this is ready for some kind of re-engagement. And then we can add them to other nurture tracks and get them kind of back on board.
Awesome. Well, we're up on time here, but I wanted to ask Nikki, in terms of content, because now, with alignment and ABM and systems and tools, content is so huge, right? Like we just can't keep sending, from particularly from a sales team perspective. Ryan talked about being creative and friendly and building a relationship. So we just can't keep sending, hey, following up, whatever, right? Like we need some good content. How do you sit down with sales? And marketing has all their stuff, right, that they have to do already that's probably backed up for a year. And then sales comes along and says, hey, I need some testimonials, for example. How do you now align on content types and even set expectations around what can actually be done? I know this sounds kind of like a, sort of should be a simple conversation, but we all know it's not. Right? How do you what tips would you give marketing and sales leaders around having effective conversations around this?
So one of the things I've started doing on a quarterly basis is really casting vision around what the quarter is going to look like. and getting their feedback on that. And I think that that's super helpful in alignment, because a lot of times what they're asking for is something that's already in play. And so if they know what's happening, then I can say, okay, now that you know this, like what else do you need? Where else do you need support? And really start to think about it that way, beyond just kind of duplicating efforts. And I'll also ask them, like I had a rep the other day that came to me and said, I need one-to-one campaigns for these 5 accounts. Well, obviously I couldn't do all 5 at one time. And so I was like, okay, what's the priority on these accounts, first of all? And what's the play? What are you trying to accomplish? And so through that conversation, we were able to figure out which ones were the priority, and then also which content would align to what he was trying to accomplish in those individual accounts. So I think that is huge. And then I would also say it's important to stay close to the customer as well, especially in these times where things are changing so much. I think you've got to stay close to the customer and have a pulse on exactly what they need.
Awesome. Well, we're running up here on time. I want to thank all our wonderful panelists who have volunteered their time today to try to help the world, because we need it, right? And just for the audience, just as a quick reminder, we're going to move over to session 5 on closing and renewals. So what we want to do is click up on the top where it says schedule, and then select the 5th session. I'm also going to post a link in the chat. And then Brooke, Ryan, Nikki, thank you so much. If you want, if folks want to get in touch with you, if you want to post like a LinkedIn or Twitter or something like that, in case they want to get in contact with you for some advice, or maybe they're super talented people that need a job or something, some value out there. If you'd like, just post that in the chat. And these will be recorded so folks can come back to watch the replays a little later. Thank you so much. One question actually that we wanted to wrap up with. Chad asks a question on account selection. Are there any solutions that plug into your CRM that will give you a list of lookalikes, anything reasonably priced right now? So if anyone has a name of a piece of software, maybe just throw that out there, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up.
I mean, on the sales side, I think maybe the most accurate source of truth would be to have your reps find accounts with LinkedIn. And if you want to create accounts with those things, not to plug my own product, but you could use LeadIQ to do that too, and sync the stuff from LinkedIn into Salesforce records. That might be an easy way around that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Also, what came to mind was built with too. You could even look for companies that, they're not using your technology obviously yet, but they're using something very similar. That's an indicator that they might be like ready to use your technology.
Built with. Okay, cool. Folks, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and I hope to see all of you soon again, hopefully in a casual setting at some point.
Thank you.
Take it easy, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.